All right. Auburn Basketball show is back. Appreciate everybody for joining us. I'm Justin Hokanson Alan Head. What's up? How we doing?
I'm doing good, man. Here to talk about a Final Four run. I know this is something
What?
you and I, yeah, who would have thought, right?
We got the Final Four right. We picked all ones, remember? We picked all ones, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're those people.
And then it played out the way that it was supposed to, right? The most chalk Final Four you have ever seen in your life. Minus
Yeah.
what, 2008? I think it's the only other time they've had all four number ones.
And the Final Four was where that year?
San Antonio. Nice symmetry.
How weird is that? Stuff like that happens in life, and you're like, wait a minute. Okay, what are the odds of that? How do you explain stuff like that? It's crazy.
The only thing better than that would be seeing Charles Barkley in San Antonio eating Cheerios. That would be
Yeah, we're talking about the women. They'll never let that one down.
No, he will not.
Zach says they can't say the Auburn Live basketball show doesn't know ball. True. I wish we could go back. I don't remember some of the picks. I feel like we got some of the upsets right, but I don't remember everything we had. But we definitely had all chalk in the Final Four.
We did.
All right, a bunch to talk about real quick. Shout out to Session Cocktail, who's a sponsor of the show. Go visit them downtown Auburn, right there on Magnolia Avenue. 4 to 7 happy hour, open on Sundays, I think 12 to 5. If you're in town, I mean, Final Four, man, like I don't remember the game times, but I think Auburn's the second game. I just don't remember if it's like a 8-ish tip or Eastern. I don't remember what it is. But anyway, if you're in town, go to dinner, then go to Session, have a drink. Obviously, they'll have the games on. And then Monday night, same thing. You know, if they make it to Monday night, same thing. Go check them out if you're in town. If you just want to like come to Auburn and spend the day Saturday and go to lunch or go to dinner and just kind of be around Auburn and watch the game, whatever. Go visit them. Session Cocktail, appreciate them. Auburn tips at 5:09. So the other games at the other games at like 2:45, 3, probably 2:33, and then 5. Oh wait, Auburn's the early game.
Yep, the other one's going to go late.
That's right. I don't know why I thought Auburn was the late game. Great. No, it's great. It's good. I'm tired of late games. I walked out of State Farm Arena Friday night. Saturday morning, I walked out of State Farm Arena about 2:40.
Oof.
Because the game didn't until after midnight. And then all that stuff takes forever, more than like a normal home game. You go down there. You got to wait forever for them to open the locker room. Then they open the locker room. Then you get to go back in there. You got to gather quotes. You go back. So yeah, and then I got back and like dumb, and I got back to the hotel about 3, maybe 10 after. Got to my room, and then I decided I'm going to rewatch parts of the game. So like I'm rewatching parts of the Michigan game. I go to bed at 4. And then I think I slept till like 8-ish. And then I caught up a little bit the next night. But then the game, that took forever because they won. So it's waiter celebration. I mean, we didn't get in the locker room to get quotes till at least an hour after the game. It was forever.
Right.
Then they shut the media workroom down about 11. So I was home about midnight. I knocked it all and just drove home. So anyway, long couple of days. Zach says national title will tip at 8:50 Central. Nice. Okay, great.
Yeah, they're on Mountain West in San Antonio, I believe. So it's like a 7:50 tip for them right there.
So they're not San Antonio, not Central?
Maybe you crossing the Mountain West at that point. Maybe it is still Central. I need to take a look at that. I know it's not far from there. The last time I drove to the state of Texas at some point, maybe it's Las Cruces in New Mexico where it finally transitions. Okay, it is Central then. It's very quickly thereafter you move to Mountain West time.
Let's talk about Auburn to the Final Four. Let's see. We didn't get a chance. It's my fault on catching up. When they got to Atlanta, it got crazy. Beat Michigan State, swept the state of Michigan. 4-0 against the Big Ten this year. By the way, it's kind of like these two Final Four runs. Now you can tackle into Kansas, Kentucky, North Carolina, tackle on Michigan and Michigan State. I mean, Auburn has beaten some programs to get to the Final Four. I thought the last 10 minutes of Michigan and the first 10 minutes of Michigan State were phenomenal basketball. Little sloppy to get down 9 against Michigan. Turnovers were crazy. If not for the turnovers, that game, they're never down 9. That game's never in doubt to me if they don't turn the ball over the way they did, and kind of let Michigan hang around. Michigan State, I thought it was maybe Auburn's best defensive effort. I mean, you could. I mean, the Tennessee game in Neville was pretty good. Both Tennessee games pretty good. But the Tennessee game in Neville, I don't know, man. I mean, you could go back to Maui, maybe parts of maybe the Memphis game, or I don't know. I thought the defensive effort, the communication, the game plan against Michigan State on defense was as good as I've seen. Hold them to 64 points. They scored 64, and they hit 4 threes in the last 2.5 minutes. I mean, out of nowhere, they just get hot. So if they don't just get hot out of nowhere, you hold them in the 50s. So I just thought their effort was incredible, and I think they've sort of circled back around to that's where they need to hang their hat. And I've always said that when they play good defense, that starts everything for them. You go look at the games, and I've said it for a month. The games they've lost are the worst defensive games they've played, period. You can't say that about offense. They've had some bad offensive games and still won. Defensively, when they've had their worst games, they lose. Their three worst defensive games are losses. 3 of the 5. I can go point out bad offensive games that they still found ways to win. It starts on defense. It's everything with them. It's everything. If they are not playing good defense, it filters to their offense, and it affects their confidence. It affects their swagger. It affects everything. It just does. And so when they're playing good defense, when they're moving, when they're getting stops, it gives them so much confidence when they start going to the other end. So I thought defensively they were phenomenal. Janai Brim was incredible. Couple double doubles by halftime of both those games. Todd Pettiford obviously against Michigan. And Auburn's back in the Final Four, and it feels different, right? I mean, that 2019 one was, it was holy cow. What is happening? What world are we in? Auburn's in the Final Four. This is insane. They're hitting 1 million threes. This one was different because they've been good. They've been the best team, or arguably the best team, all season long. And it was more of an expectation. And so it feels like it's great. It's always great to get there, no matter if you're Duke or anybody. Getting the Final Four there's always jubilation there. But this one feels like, cool, we're there. All right, how are we going to beat Florida? It's like it's very quickly on trying to win the whole thing. But what were your thoughts watching the Michigan and Michigan State games?
Well, I think you kind of called it perfectly when you said the last 10 minutes of Michigan and leading into probably the first half against Michigan State. Really good basketball from Auburn. And I will say this on the Michigan State game, that's probably the first one in a while where I saw that they were locked in and focused from start to finish. I mean, Janai wasn't looking at refs and asking for calls. There was no bullshit from Chad. It was just locked in and them playing extremely hard. And that's the kind of effort and game it's going to take for them when they go to the Final Four playing against Florida. They have to have that kind of effort and then probably an A game from their offense, because that is the one criticism if I'm going to, beyond what Janai Broom was able to bring to the table against Michigan State. It really wasn't an efficient night for the rest of the team. I think your other leading scorer was Todd Pettiford, and he only had 10 points. Now they spread it around better, got contributions from guys like Chaney Johnson. Denver, I think, chipped in with close to double-digit points as well. But realistically, if Janai doesn't have probably his most efficient game in over a month and a half, and he was just unstoppable at times. I mean, he really was. When you think about player of the year, he was the player of the year that night. I mean, there was nobody better on the court than him. And Tom Izzo, Michigan State, play a brand of rugged defense where they get into you, and they're problems for people. and he was up to the test. And to your point about Auburn in the Final Four, you're right. I said the same thing on the call-in show last night. It's so wildly different from, I mean, you covered the team in 2019 or followed it closely. I can't remember if you were back on the beat or not at that
I
point,
wasn't back
Justin,
in it yet. No.
but obviously followed it closely.
Mm-hmm.
And the run they kind of went on, right? It was a little fortuitous in that, you had to get a break against New Mexico State. I mean, you had to get those missed free throws down the stretch. I mean, that was a good team. Chris Jan's fantastic basketball coach. I don't think anybody realized how good he was at the time or how good that New Mexico State team was. But then that just kind of was a catapult for them because then you go and you beat Bill Self in Kansas, and then you destroy North Carolina, and then obviously beat Kentucky and have Virginia on the ropes, who's the eventual national champion. But again, you're right. To see an Auburn team that has been one of the top 4 teams all year long, and I think the Final Four got it right. I think they have the top 4 teams in the country playing in the Final Four.
Couldn't have worked out better. It's exactly how it should be this year.
And I think you could stake a claim for any one of those teams being called number 1 at various points of the season.
Even the way it worked out, I think is perfect. SEC's been the best conference. They are going to have a team in the national championship game as they should, and then figure out the next best team, and they can play the SEC's best, which is what you've got. Duke and Houston can figure out, and one of you can play Auburn, Florida, who were the 2 best teams. I don't care. Alabama's defense was iffy sometimes. Tennessee's offense was iffy. Auburn and Florida were the best teams in the league.
Agreed.
They get to represent the SEC. Duke and Houston are the best of the rest. One of them gets to take on the SEC. Like it's exactly how it should be. It's perfect.
No, I don't disagree. But to watch Auburn play up to expectation in the moment, it was just, I think it was cathartic for Auburn fans to be able to see that, for an Auburn team to have expectations of making a Final Four, whether they were the expectations the coaching staff had or not. I think that was the fan base's expectations to get to the Final Four, and to see this Auburn team live up to that and for all that to come to fruition. It was something that, if you're a fan of Bruce Pearl, if you're a fan of Auburn basketball, I think it just reminded you of what greatness looks like. And let's be honest here. I think we've talked about NIL hasn't always been, I mean, I think they've got support, right? But it hasn't always been where maybe the coaching staff would have wanted it. This is a reminder to those people that are giving their money and or to how they're going to split rev share. Bruce Pearl deserves every bit of the NIL money that needs to come his way, because when he's supported in that way, you see what he's capable of doing. And I just thought it was a really big night for the basketball program, a big night for Bruce. And now he's got an opportunity to cement his legacy and probably stamp his name in the Hall of Fame if you can win a national championship. But to do that, you had to get to the Final Four. You had to beat 2 really good teams in Michigan and a Final Four coach in Dusty May. And then obviously a coaching legend in Tom Izzo, who was 9-0 against the SEC prior to this in the tournament, before Bruce was able to get this one done. 10-0, excuse me. 10-0 prior to this game. And again, just really big night for Auburn. Really big one for the fans. And, obviously a huge night for the players, and one that they'll always remember.
Yeah, 10-0 and 8-2 all time in the Elite Eight. And and obviously had that win over Pearl in Tennessee in 2010. So that was sweet for Pearl. I mean, he's not thinking about it much, but it's always nice to even that one up and feel like you got a little payback there, kind of come around. And just to beat, when you're a coach, to have a win over Tom Izzo in the tournament, that's a big deal.
Yes.
Those for a coach like Bruce Pearl, I mean, that for any coach, like that's really meaningful to him. The same way, beating Calipari in the tournament, or beating Bill Self in the tournament was, or beating Roy Williams, right?
Yes.
That stuff that's pretty cool. Yeah, I think first of all, for anybody for everybody that made the trip on Friday night and Sunday, unbelievable. I like It's hard to put into words that atmosphere. I mean, that was. There's something about getting away from like Neville Arena is great,
Mhm.
but there are times where Neville where there is a sense of I don't know, like a sense of, well, we're at home, we're gonna win. I don't have
Yes.
to go crazy. The students will go crazy. Like moments, they'll go crazy. But Neville could be so much more, in my opinion. There's just times where people sit on their hands. Um, and in a big games, like they'll have their moments, but there's times where in the game, I mean, I'm at every game. There's just so many times in the middle of these games that I'm like, hey, why does it take the team doing something spectacular for you to cheer? Why don't you get off your butt and cheer? And that was not the case at State Farm. That was it was like fans when you go to a road game. When when you go to a road game, it's more rowdy because those people, they made the effort to go on the road. They are damn sure going to stand up and be loud and be rowdy. They didn't just pop downtown to go to the game, and like they're there. That's what State Farm was, man. Like Friday night and then Sunday was, there's no Michigan, there's no Ole Miss fans. They all sold their tickets. Auburn bought them all. And it was, I mean, if the capacity is, I think it's just under 16, I'd say Michigan State had their sections behind their bench. And then outside of that, there was a handful of them scattered in the lower bowl. I could probably count them. I mean, so I don't know how many a section holds. I mean, I'd say I'll be generous and say they had 2,000 people. Let's say they had their two main sections. I'd say, I mean, two main sections, and the place is pretty big. So I'll give them about 2,000 people, which is not bad. Michigan State, it's a long way to travel. A lot of them are
For
probably
sure.
coming from Michigan or whatever. You travel down to Atlanta. They had everything else is Auburn. I mean, everything else was Auburn. There was not a green shirt in that upper deck that I saw. Um, and most of the lower bowl, there's a couple scattered here and there, but you could just look section after section after section after section was completely orange. Auburn fans, Auburn fans, Auburn fans. It was they 100% made a difference in the Michigan game, and they 100% made a difference in the Michigan State game, like without question. The when Auburn started to come back against Michigan, that place, I mean, Neville's 9,000 people.
Right.
Okay. State Farm there's there's let's say 13,500 to 14,000 Auburn fans inside State Farm. Bro, it was loud. And those fans were loud but all the time. I mean, they were 2 minutes into the game. It's let's go Auburn chants going on. The game just started. I mean, every dull moment, every moment that it felt like there was a little bit of a lull, it was let's go Auburn, let's go Auburn. It wasn't just after big made buckets, but when Auburn went on that run early in the Michigan State game was pure insanity. It was the same thing when they went on that run against Michigan in that extended run. I mean, it was for any Auburn fans that went. I think that I would be speaking for them and saying it's one of the coolest Auburn sporting events I've ever attended. It always will be, not just because of what was on the line, but just the energy
Yeah.
inside that place, and then of course Sunday to go to the Final Four. I wrote it a couple of times, but I was like before the game, I leaned over to somebody. I said, they quite literally will never have a better opportunity or a better situation to go to the Final Four ever.
No.
Ever. They'll never have the combination of a team that good playing in Atlanta to go to the Final Four. I mean, maybe it'll happen, maybe, but the combination of you're in the Elite Eight in Atlanta, and you have arguably the best team in the history of your program. If they didn't come through, it would be just a monumental letdown. A
Right.
monumental letdown, and they didn't. They didn't. They didn't. They didn't. They didn't let down. But that crowd and the atmosphere was just, man, it was awesome. It was awesome. Won't be like that for San Antonio. Obviously, everybody will bring their fans. Duke travels.
Yes.
Houston now. Houston fans are going to be there. Whew. I mean, they got probably the shortest distance, right? Florida, Auburn. So everybody will have their people there. But yeah, I mean, do you come out of it? So Auburn made the Final Four. Do you come out of it saying they're back to playing some of their best basketball, or is it kind of what I talked to Stephen Pearl afterwards, and he was like, everybody pushed the panic button too soon, which is what Bruce had been saying too, and we had kind of talked about. I think people nationally sort of hit the panic button. I don't think people that followed this team did because they know the SEC and but I mean, do we come out of this saying, do you feel right now like Auburn's back to playing elite basketball, or were they ever not playing really good basketball? They just faltered against some good teams, and they were never. It's like they never fell off a cliff. They lost a couple games, and now they're back winning some games. Where do you see them going in? I mean, do you think they're playing Michigan State? Was that their A game?
No, not their A game, not from an efficiency standpoint, and not on the offensive end, maybe defensively. I think defensively, that's as good as Auburn has looked in the better of a month. But also, think about how spread out these games are. The guys are getting rest now. They're going into a weekend. They're playing on adrenaline, but they're focused. I think that's what I see, Justin, right now more than anything, is this is a team that is locked in and focused from Creighton on. Like, you can just tell when they take the court that they are prepared, that they're ready. And I think more than anything, what you saw down the stretch is yes, you were playing really good teams, and they faltered some against good teams. But I think their energy is increased. And you're right, they've decided they're going to be a defensive first team right now. And you're seeing that on their rotations, how they're funneling guys to both Janai and Dylan, guys stepping up and just making plays on the defensive end. And even a guy like Miles Kelly, who he wanted to play well offensively in his hometown of Atlanta. I mean, wanted it badly. And it just wasn't his night either night. But he didn't let it affect his defense at all. He was still as locked in on that end and trying to get rebounds and doing everything he could to help the team, even with the shot not going down. That said, I think to beat Florida or to beat a Duke or a Houston, Auburn is going to have to play a little bit more efficiently on the offensive end. I think somebody besides Janai is going to have a big moment. And you got that against Michigan, right? Both Denver and Todd went for 20 points. Janai had 20, but it was kind of it was one of those shooting nights he had where he goes like 9 for 22 or something of that nature.
Yeah.
Completely different game for him against Michigan State where he goes 10 for 13. Obviously gets injured. Let's not overlook that storyline where he gets injured. Looks like he might have like slightly hyperextended the elbow, goes in. You see what he mouths to Pearl or to his teammates where he says, "I'm done." Comes back out, has a Willis Reed moment, even though he doesn't know who Willis Reed is. I'm sure he's Googled him by now.
Yeah.
But to see him go out and lay it on the line for his team, favoring his arm, right? Like he was clearly favoring that arm, making one-handed rebounds. When he banged that three-point shot, man, I mean, I thought he was going to blow the roof off State Farm Arena.
That was wild.
It just, again, if you had a question about was he really in the discussion for National Player of the Year in that moment, he absolutely was. And I think his body of work stands up to Cooper Flagg's. That'll be interesting to see what the voters come down with as far as who wins that award. But I think anybody that was questioning Janai Broom's legitimacy in that run, if you watch that game that night, you realize how special he truly is. But back to answering your question, I think they're locked in and focused in a way like you saw in the beginning of the season. Like the way you saw that team in Maui is the way you see that team now. I don't think they faltered. Again, they played a tough stretch of games. You're playing them tightly where you're playing on Wednesday and then turning back around and playing a Saturday. You're getting like 6 days worth of rest now. You're coming into it fresh. Mentally, you're focused, and you know what's on the line too. I mean, I think when you play an SEC schedule and it's a grind every night, it's easy for you to kind of have an emotional letdown. In these situations, you're not going to be emotionally let down because everybody knows what's at stake. The next game you lose is the last one.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody wants to be that team and they're reminded of that. Bruce has got their attention right now. And I think it even plays for Auburn to Auburn's strong suit. And you can talk about this playing Florida in a rematch because Auburn knows, this team knows they didn't give Florida their best shot. I think Florida probably got a B minus C plus game from them their first time because let's be honest here. I think Bruce knew, I think Steven knew, I think the staff knew how good this Florida team was. I think some of the kids on the team just were that level of confidence that they thought, hey, man, we're playing in Auburn, we're winning this game. And Florida had a very different mindset. Clayton comes in, has a just fantastic night. Condon, Howe, they get theirs. I think it's going to be a different game this time around. Florida's not playing their best brand of basketball since probably UConn, maybe even the round before that. It's been a little bit different for them in the tournament. That doesn't mean they won't turn it around and play their best game against Auburn. And they probably still are the most balanced team left in the tournament as far as getting contributions from, front and back court. That said, I love Bruce Pearl when he has that underdog mentality. Please, favor them, whatever you want to do. Bruce is a master motivator, and I think he's going to have this team ready to play, and we'll just see how it all shakes itself out. But I do think that it gives them a little bit of an edge coming into this game. They'll have that chip on their shoulder, and they'll be ready to compete.
Yeah, I do wish him really Miles and Chad both are a little bit of it in a little bit of an offensive slump. Miles went off against Alabama State, but really Chad, I think in all 4 games, really hasn't done offensively lit it up, and Miles in the last 3 games hasn't. Now Chad's done some other things. Like at one point in the game at Michigan State, I looked at Chad was having a bad shooting night, but you look up and he had 5 assists and no turnovers. And of course, he plays defense. So and same thing with Miles. You look up, he grabs 6 boards. And so they're still making winning plays. That's what I like about this team is I don't know if there's a guy. I mean, that Chaney might not score, but he might play good defense, or Dylan will play good defense. He doesn't need to score a bunch. I like the fact that the guys are still making winning plays. I was trying to look up. Chad here real quick. By the way, you got a couple things to monitor. All right, so Chad
he had a good game against Creighton. I think he had 16 or 18 points against Creighton.
He did. He did have a good game against Creighton. He is 0 for 3 from 3 against Michigan. He went 2 of 8. He shot 8 threes against Michigan State. 2 of 8. That's not like him.
Right.
That's not like him. Yeah, so he had 17 against Creighton. But you look at Chad since the Alabama game where he got ejected. Since then, he hasn't hit double digits other than Creighton. So this is a guy was your second leading scorer. And the Alabama game, granted, he only played 17 minutes. But the Alabama game, including that game, 7, 7, 9, 5, 17 against Creighton, 6, 6 against Michigan State. So he is on an incredible scoring slump. And it is interesting that it coincides with the ejection and the attention that it got. And I think it was a moment where he's gotten away with a lot. In that game, I think the staff and the players really got onto him after that. Like, okay, like enough's enough. We just lost that game, and this is and his offensive output has not been the same. He's still shooting. He's had a couple of games of some luck. He's still shooting, but he's still rebounding. He's still grabbing some boards. If you look at that, if you look at those games where I just listed off a bunch of single digit scoring outputs, his assists in those games are 3, 6, 3, 3, 1, 2, 5. So he's got a game of 6, a game of 5, and 3 games of 3 assists, and he's not even the point guard. And he's mainly been about 1 turnover or no turnover. So it's been interesting. I mean, he seems like he's dishing the ball out more. He's still shooting. He's just not shooting great, but I don't know. The effort's still been there. He's still been locked in on defense. Yeah. So I don't think it's an issue of he's not playing with passion and energy. They're just kind of not falling a little bit for him. And so you think about the fact that he's not shooting that well right now. Miles isn't shooting that well right now. And you're still in the Final Four. one thing to monitor, not just with Janai, but Chad ended that game with a brace on his left wrist.
Yep.
I don't know if people noticed that. It was kind of impressive that he hit one of those really late threes he hit. But he did something. He kind of sprained his wrist during that game at some point, kept playing, probably precautionary. But when they got back to Toomer's corner, he had a brace on his left wrist, which a lot of times happens if it's just precautionary. It doesn't mean there's, it just means don't maybe push it back anymore. And then of course Janai. And then the other thing with Miles is weird is yes, he was missing shots, but Miles was having trouble even handling the basketball. And so I don't know. He's dealt with that right wrist all year. He's had that tape all year, and he's been able to shoot with it and drive. But the last couple games, he literally couldn't handle the basketball at times against Michigan and Michigan State, where it's like he couldn't even. I mean, I don't know what was going on there. I don't know if it was a different tape job or more time. I don't know what was going on there, but there's times when that ball got in his right hand and he couldn't even dribble it. It was weird. It led to some turnovers against Michigan.
Yeah.
And and even one, I remember when he made the steal against Michigan State, he makes that steal down the sideline and he was fumbling the ball. He couldn't even really get it. He went up for a layup at one point in the Michigan State game and couldn't, kind of fumbled it. It just, I don't know what was going on there where he couldn't, he was just off in handling the ball. But yeah, Janai was great. Tahad was good. Dylan was fantastic. I tweeted out earlier, I rewatched the game. And Dylan's funny. Dylan's a pretty humble guy, but we talked to him after both these last two games. And he was all but saying, like, you guys are asking me about defense. And he's like, I've been doing this for 2 years. I mean, he pretty much said it after the Michigan State game. Because we talked to Stephen Pearl, and he's like, he's been un-effing believable. He didn't bleep himself on defense. And we kind of talked to Dylan. He's like, listen, yes. Like, yeah, I mean, I think I played well. He's like, I've been playing good defense for 2 years. Like, I mean, I didn't just start this. Like, go watch Purdue. Go watch him multiple times against Braden Smith, who is a first-team All-American point guard.
Yes.
Multiple times in that Purdue game, Dylan Smith locked him up one-on-one. But I rewatched the Michigan State game. I tweeted out, I was like, I think at some point Dylan guarded every player that Michigan State put on the floor.
He did.
I mean, it was unbelievable. I'm watching him guard Jace Richardson and force a tough shot. I'm watching him do it against Akins or Holloman or Kohler I'm like, this dude is so valuable. I don't think we understand how valuable it is. You have to watch a game twice or be a coach and study the film. And it's why you hear other coaches or you hear commentators talk about Dylan because they watch it and see it. His value when he's on the floor on defense is it's hard to put into words. It really is. His ability to switch and for Auburn to just be able to switch and him be able to not be okay against a guard or be on an island or help and isolate it is just, it's incredible. And like to where he can do that. And then if they've got a 6'11" guy, he can then drop back and still get them. Whereas Chaney, there could be a height issue down there. Dylan, there wouldn't be that issue and he can still play. Like his value is insane. He's playing some incredible defense. I think I put in there like 5 of his last 6 games, his box score rating is +10 or better. So him and Janai are playing outstanding basketball. Tahad's playing outstanding basketball. I would agree with you. I think defensively, they're playing really, really well.
Yeah.
I don't know what their like A++ game was. Pretty dang good against Michigan State. I mean, they were switching like I said, until that barrage of threes the last 2 minutes, they had go look at the shooting numbers for their guards. Holloman was over 10.
Yes.
Akins, until he hits a couple threes at the very end, their leading scorer was, 3 of like 12 in that game. Richardson got his points. He was just 4 of 13. And then Fears didn't do anything scoring. So defensively, Auburn's efforts there. You're missing obviously your 2 best shooters, two of your 2 best scorers. Kelly and Baker and Missouri need to get them going a little bit. Thought Chaney was really good. They were on Chaney really hard to box out against Michigan State. There were some moments where he didn't box out, and he gave up some boards, and he got to give a foul. They were on him hard. But rewatching, he hit some big bucket. I mean, when Janai went out, he hit 2 big buckets. He hit 2 big buckets when Janai went out. He won early, but Janai went out specifically, and he had the fast break, and then he had another post up. So timely buckets from Chaney. I thought he played. I thought he played well. I don't know, man. Like thinking ahead to the Florida game, I'm kind of with you that I think Auburn will play better. Being at that game in Neville, it was easily the worst defensive game they've played all year. Easily.
Definitely.
They were lost. It's the only time all year I've watched an Auburn play defense and they were like, we don't like. Now the coaches said, Bruce, I remember specifically, Bruce said after the game, they did not stay true to the scout. He goes, we were doing it early. You remember Auburn jumped out in that game. They were up 10.
Yes.
Auburn was up 10 very early in that game. And Bruce said, for some reason, we stopped locking into the scout. And Florida turned down 10 to up 10 at halftime. Yeah, you've already scouted them. You've got a full week. I do expect Auburn to come out defensively and play better. The other X factor is people forget Elijah Martin did not even play in that game.
True.
So that's a little worrisome. I mean, you're talking about one of their best players didn't even play. Handlogton was not available in that game. So now you're playing Florida with Elijah Martin and with Handlogton coming off the bench. So you're playing a better version.
Condon has nicked up.
Yeah, Condon hadn't been great, and he's so good. He's the broom, like he's got the height and athletic ability to go to deal with Broom. He sprints up and down the court. It's interesting. It's a little different Florida team. I think Auburn's going to play better defensively. But yeah, they were so confused that first Florida game. They just didn't have any answers, and Florida hit 13 threes, and it was I don't think that'll happen again. The other thing is with Elijah Martin playing, I kind of wonder in the game in Auburn the fact that Elijah Martin wasn't playing, if that gave Walter Clayton even more of a green light in that game, and he went off. And I wonder with Elijah Martin if it doesn't maybe balance it out a little bit. You could say, well, somebody, they're both good players, but Walter Clayton is a different breed. And if he just starts dribbling around there and jacking up threes,
yeah,
that's a problem. And so I do wonder if having Martin back, anything that takes the ball out of Clayton's hands a little bit, it's almost like I'd almost rather that, like have Martin back because they have another scoring threat and maybe Clayton doesn't take quite as many shots. Because I felt like in the Auburn game in Neville, he's like, all right, Elijah's not out, so it's on me, and I'm just going to go off, and he did. And so I would say that while you could say Elijah Martin's back and they're going to be even better, I could also say that's maybe the ball in Clayton's hands a little bit less. It's maybe a couple of shots less for him if Martin's back. But you're right about the motivation factor. You get a chance to come into the Final Four and go, not only did you lose, for a week, he didn't even really need to say it. The players know they got punked in their own house. Bruce isn't going to have to say much. He's not going to have to say much to these guys. Sometimes he does. Not now. I mean, they'll be locked in now, and he won't have to say much. You'll be reminded. But yeah, you got that motivational factor, and Todd Golden can say whatever he wants to his team, but they know they walked into Auburn and beat them pretty good. And Todd can all week, he can go, listen, guys, that doesn't mean anything. That game doesn't mean anything. But to those players are still going to go, but we punked these guys. We're going to do it again. Yeah, you can't just erase that. So now it could go both ways. Auburn could use that and come in and with what did we say after that game? What did Bruce say? We weren't the hungrier team. He goes, we were ranked number 1. They came in knowing if we beat Auburn here, they were the hungrier team. He goes, we didn't match their hunger. So if you're Auburn and you're coming into this thing and you're the underdog, or I think the analytics say they're favorite, but he'll play them as the underdog. You could use that. It could go the other way. Florida could come in and be confident, and it could be a great thing for them. They could feed off of it. They could go, we're going to punk these guys again, and they could play like it. That could happen. That could happen too. But I'm with you. I don't hate the dynamic going into this one. Even though Auburn lost it, and it's a tough matchup. Florida's a hard matchup for anybody.
Sure.
I don't hate the dynamic of having lost the first one and coming in and being able to use that as a motivational factor.
I agree. And to your point about being overconfident, I think that may have affected some of this Auburn team in the first matchup because, look, this is pretty much minus Miles Kelly and Tahad Pettiford, right? That are your major contributors. This is the same Auburn team that beat Florida in the SEC championship game just a year ago and didn't just beat them. I mean, they absolutely embarrassed them in that championship game. Now, Micah Hanlockton went out in that game. That changed the dynamics of that game completely. But from the early stages in that game before his injury, you could tell Auburn was dialed into that one, and they were ready because they had gotten embarrassed earlier that year in Gainesville. Carry that forward a year from there. I think Auburn will – I mean, again, they'll be focused. They'll be ready. Florida will be too. You're talking about two coaching staffs that know each other very well. I think Todd Golden was on record as saying Stephen Pearl is one of his absolute best friends earlier this season in an interview. He talked about how Bruce gave him his shot, how he owes him a lot, emulates some of, what they did at Auburn within his Florida program. So these are two guys. These are two coaching staffs that know what each other want to do. They watched each other in the SEC this year. They'll be prepared. I do think Auburn's going to have a little bit of the mental edge because of the mentality that they'll play with. They'll be hungry. And I'll say this. I think Todd Golden is one of the bright young stars in this game. But this is his first Final Four. And I will be interested to see how he responds in that moment because there are a lot of young coaches that have gotten to the Final Four for their first time and it didn't exactly go the way they wanted it to. I mean, you think about Mike Krzyzewski, had to lose in a couple Final Fours, I think, before he got a breakthrough moment. You think about Billy Donovan getting there once before and it not necessarily working. Rick Pitino, a lot of really good coaches early on in their career, they get to this stage and it's just different. The stage is just so much bigger, and I'm not saying that Todd's not up to the moment. He very well might be. But it wouldn't be a surprise for me to see this team struggle a little bit and just look slightly different from what they did during the regular season where they were very natural and in their element.
Yeah, I was looking back at that game, and I may write something. I may just do a little look back at that game, but I mean, Condon dominated. Like Condon was 7 of 8 from 2, had 17 points and 10 rebounds. Hauk had 9 rebounds.
Yep.
So those two dudes had 30 plus points and like 19 rebounds. Broom was inefficient. I mean, he had 18, but he was 7 of 16.
Yeah.
Kelly was good. Kelly hit 3 threes. Denver was really bad. Denver had 3 turnovers, 1 assist, 2 points. Tahad was pretty good, 14 points. Tahad actually hit a couple threes. Chaney was pretty good. Chaney had 13 points, was 4 of 6. Chaney was 6 of 8 from inside the arc. So Chaney played well. Chad was nowhere to be seen. I mean, Chad had 6 points and was 1 of 2, 1 of 3. That was a tough game for him. He only played 19 minutes in that game. I don't know if that was I don't know what happened. I don't know if he was being out physical in that game or but he only played 19 minutes. Moore played 11. Chaney played 21. I think that was a matchup issue, probably. I mean, Chaney played 21. That's generally more than he's going to play. Chad only played 19. It was really a non-factor. It is a tough game for Chad. I mean, they're a physical team. I mean, even Will Richard and Chinaloo, and Abbott, like whoever, whoever. I mean, whoever he ends up. There's a lot of strong dudes out there that could be in. This is maybe not his game. We'll see. But Auburn lost this game on the. I mean, Auburn scored 81. They got to 81. Janai, like I said, was a little inefficient. Auburn only had 8 turnovers, and that's not terrible. I mean, Florida has a top 10 defense. 8 turnovers is not bad. I mean, Auburn averages about 7 a game. They had 16 assists. The issue is just defense. This is a game they gave up the most assists all year, 22. 22 assists for Florida. And man, I don't know what happened. This game was 31-25 Auburn with 6 minutes until halftime. It was 31-25 Auburn with 6 minutes until halftime. 31-25. At halftime, it was 48-38 Florida. Auburn gave up 23 points in the last 6 minutes of that half. And I remember being there where they were absolutely shell-shocked. And it was weird for a team that's this mature, that's played this much basketball at that point in the season they did not handle it well. They were, and I almost think being at home almost hurt them. I think they were like, I think the whole arena was like, what is happening?
Sure.
And they didn't handle it well. And Florida got on a run, and Auburn did not buckle down and play defense, and they didn't handle it well. And I mean, you come out at halftime, it's 48-38, and then
I think Florida gets up by 20 at one point before Auburn cuts it back down.
Yeah, I mean, 5 minutes into the half, you went from down 10 to down 15, and then it's 18. You're down 18 within 6 minutes. So Florida has that run in the last 6 minutes. So in the 6 minutes before halftime, and then the 6 minutes after halftime, Florida went from down 6 to up 18. I mean, in Auburn, so Auburn just did not handle the adversity well. When Florida started to make a run, they could not get their focus and concentration and get a few stops. Finally, they got their feet underneath them and started to sort of chip away, got it down to 12, got it down to 9 with 8.5 minutes. It was 9 with 8 minutes. Still 9 with 7 minutes. So like they fought back and turned it from 18 to 9. And the big moment in that game, for people that remember, the big moment in that game was it was a 9-point game, and Florida got 2 offensive rebounds by Hauk, and they hit a 3, and it was a dagger. Auburn was fighting back, and Hauk, there was a play where Hauk, it looked like he fouled like Kelly, or he kind of went over the back and like knocked somebody away, got an offensive board. They missed. He got it again. They kick it out. They hit a 3. The fans were booing, and it was just a dagger. It was 12, and then Florida kind of built it back up to 13-14, and then Auburn ends up losing by 9. But, yeah, so I don't know. I mean, looking back at that game, maybe I think there are probably a lot of things you can take from that and go, is Florida good? Yeah, but we played easily our worst game of the season and didn't handle adversity on top of it. Not only did we not play well, but they went on a run and we just kind of folded. And so, are you going to do that again? Maybe there is something to take from that this Auburn team is got a little grit right now after the Alabama State game and everybody being called out. Maybe there's a little grit to them right now. Fought back against Michigan. Michigan State tried to come back, and Auburn was having none of it. I mean, Michigan State tried to chip away in the second half of that game, and Auburn was like, nope, that game stayed at 8, 9, 10, 11, even up to 14 most of the second half. I mean, Auburn didn't let that thing get to 3 or 4. So maybe there's a little grit to them, and they'll handle it differently against Florida. They know what to expect. They know how good. They know the height. They got all that stuff going. So, yeah, I'm kind of with you on the mindset that Auburn might have. Now, we could say all this, and guess what? Florida is good enough that you could come out there with the best game plan in the world, and then it's Clayton 3, Condon getting a rebound, Broom struggling to be efficient. And here we go again. I mean, they can go on a run the same way Auburn can or Duke can or whatever. It's like you can, but yeah. What's crazy is the stat. I don't know if you saw the stat, but in the last decade, these four teams. Or wait a minute, is it ever? Is it the KenPom stat? Is it is it in the KenPom era? I think it's the KenPom era. These four teams in the Final Four are in the top 10 of the best 10 teams in the KenPom era. And it's I don't remember this Duke team's like the second best, and then it's like Houston at 4, and it's like Florida at 6 or 7, and then Auburn at like 8 or 9 or something like that. So it's Duke, Houston, Florida, Auburn. But these four teams, according to KenPom, in the KenPom era, which is whatever, 20-ish years, I don't remember exactly what it is, are 4 of the top 10 overall. So you could say it's subjective, but you could almost make the case that it's objective, that it's the greatest Final Four that we've ever seen. You can make that case.
I wouldn't disagree with you. And this is the most interesting part out of all of this to me, right? Yes, you have the pedigree of 4 teams that are at the top of their game, and potentially the stoutest Final Four that's ever been played, as you said, in the KenPom era from an analytic standpoint. And Auburn has played all 3 of its competitors.
That's nuts.
They have a scout on everybody they're going to play. Those teams have a scout on Auburn. Auburn is not going to be surprised by what these teams do. Now, obviously, I think Houston and Duke have probably changed a pretty good bit since Auburn played them. But I just find it completely wild that this schedule could not have prepared Auburn any more for the point that they're going to be stepping into. I mean, they are absolutely tested and ready. And if they play their A game offensively, I mean, I feel like they're locked in on the defensive side of the ball. But if their A game shows up offensively and you get contributions from guys like Miles and Chad where you've been missing those, and Denver's steady, he's handled ball pressure so much better down the stretch by comparison to where he was in that Florida game earlier in the season.
Yeah, go back to the Georgia game. It was really bad.
And I think he has matured a lot this year in becoming a real point guard. And they've done a really good job of working him and Tahad together, especially in this run that they've been on in the tournament, where they're playing them together a lot and using them both as primary ball handlers at different times and playing the other one off the ball, and almost in an interchangeable way. So it's been a really cool nuance to watch. And they incorporated some of that in the season, but I've just seen more of it here in this stretch run, and I think it was a really good move by this staff. But I feel like Auburn's prepared for this. How this game's going to turn out against Florida, I don't know. Do I think Auburn has an opportunity to win? Absolutely. And I think they're prepared for it. I think they'll be ready for it, and we'll see. And if you beat Florida, then it's just let it all hang out, man, against whoever it's going to be between Houston and Duke. I mean, you just go for broke in that game. And again, I think if you get past Florida, you're playing with house money. Like, there's no expectation, in my opinion, for Auburn to win the national championship against whoever comes out of that other side. And maybe Auburn fans feel differently than me, but I think the national pundits are going to pick whoever's coming out of that other bracket, specifically if it's Duke. I mean, I think most of them have loaded up on the fact that Duke is the best team in the tournament right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so Auburn, again, will get the opportunity to be the underdog in that matchup if that's the way that it plays out. And how better for it to end than if Auburn can get past Florida, get redemption from that, and get a second chance at Duke and Cooper Flagg, and you have the 2 guys that are going to be going for the National Player of the Year in the national championship game.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know if you're casting for a movie, Justin. I'm stealing a line from Jeffrey here, but you better start writing a script, big dog, because that's the stuff that movies are made of. That is 100%.
That would be legendary. I mean, it would be.
I mean, that's an ESPN 30 for 30 ready to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that would be, and you hope the game would live up to it. But if that played out, yeah, if the game then was really good, if the game was great, it would be an all-timer. It'd be an all-timer. It'd be all of the metrics say it's two of the best teams in the last 25 years, and it's the two leading guys for National Player of the Year for the last 3 months.
Yes.
I think I was just looking at the Naismith. Of course, John Broom's already National Player of the Year, by the way. Sporting News is a reputable National Player of the Year outlet. So everybody's going to look at Naismith. I get that, but John Broom is a National Player of the Year. But I think it's announced right before the game. Like I think the winners are announced like on the 6th.
I believe you're right.
And so the game is the 7th. So like we'll know a National Player of the Year. So you'd have a little bit of a and yeah, you're right on Auburn. Florida's going to get the majority of the picks over Auburn. And then if Auburn were to win it, the picks would go the other way. I would say most of the picks are going to be on Duke. That'll be the majority, although that one might be a little more even. But I think most people are going to think Duke's offense is more firepower there. And then Florida, most people are going to pick Florida mainly because they already beat Auburn. They're going to look at that and go, well, they already beat them in Auburn. And they're going to look at the front line and go, the front line can handle Janai Broom. And if you handle Janai Broom, then what else do you have? Which is fine. It makes sense. But yeah, it's it really couldn't have worked out better. It's going to be an unbelievable fight. By the way, it feels like forever ago that Auburn was screwing around with Alabama State to the point that Dylan Cardwell and Stephen Pearl had to get on radio and blast their team. Like, isn't it wild? Like they did that and we're like, well, they got to respond against Creighton. And you're like, not only do they respond against Creighton, then they're going to beat Michigan, then they're going to beat Michigan State, and they're going to be in the Final Four. It's just funny how you never know how things are going to play out. But it was credit Dylan Cardwell and Stephen Pearl. It was the absolute right button to push, 1,000%, and it absolutely changed the dynamic of this team. Maybe they beat Creighton without that, maybe. But I would say whatever issues were festering, I think you could certainly make the argument that you don't get by Michigan and Michigan State if those issues are still going on, if there's something missing that they were seeing that nobody else was, maybe you get by Creighton, maybe. But I would say if those issues were still there, you get down Michigan, you probably don't come back, or Michigan State just out toughs you and you win, and you lose. It's Dylan, I was talking about this the other day, dude. Dylan, I think we talked about this at one point, but I think it's just even more glaring now. Dylan Cardwell, I don't know, man. Whatever your list of top 10 most impactful student athletes in the history of Auburn University are, Dylan Cardwell better be on it. I don't care. I don't care if he scores 1 point or 3 points a game or what. I don't I don't care. He is a really good basketball player. His defense is incredible. He's an underrated player on this team, even with the attention he gets. And then just his ability to be an ambassador for the school, the program, but his leadership, and sticking with the team when they got Walker Kessler, and sticking with him when they got Janai Broom, and not going anywhere. And just his leadership with this team the last 2 years, really. I know they lost to Yale last year, but that year, but certainly this year, I'm telling you, if you could go to practice, the amount of times I've been to practice, we all know that this group can be a little loose.
Sure.
We know that they can like to have fun, and we know that they need. Dylan is the one that reins them in at practice. Like, Dylan is the one that is the serious one when it's time to get serious. I've watched him numerous times absolutely lay into that team during practice and tell them to shut up and stop whining and quit the bitching and like whatever. Like, Dylan is that dude. And I've seen him get as mad as I've ever seen him in my life at times. And so, like, he's been that dude that they needed. This team likes to have fun. I almost think he's the anchor. Like, they can all goof around and have fun, and Dylan Dylan is one of the main ones that keeps them accountable and has no problem telling them to like chill out and play or get back on the road here, get back between the lines or whatever. So I think his leadership and poise and demeanor sort of allows some of those other guys to be who they are, because you've got Dylan that it's not everybody running free. Dylan's right here. And if anybody needs a little pullback or a little scolding or a little yank back in line, like Dylan can bring some of that. And I think the other guys look at Dylan and go, all right, I got to get back in line. Like Dylan's doing the right thing. Let's get back to doing. I'm just telling you, he's so freaking important to this team. And we're going to look back and we're going to talk about Janai. We're going to talk about Tahad and all these guys. And Dylan may never get the credit he deserves, but man, he deserves a ton. And just all the other stuff's just cool. And he just deserves a lot of credit for it.
No, I agree. And he's probably the featured one of those guys right now, but there's probably two others that deserve mention as far as being leaders on this team that are glue pieces, that Auburn's not where they are right now if these guys don't step up at various moments of the season, and it's Chaney Johnson and it's Chris Moore. Those three together, to me, are the epitome of being selfless players for this team at various times, and just being the consistency. Because you're right, this is a team that likes to have fun. They play with swagger. They swashbuckle at times. You know what I mean? They talk smack. They you know what I mean? That's just who they are. But you have to have guys that can control the locker room when you need it to be controlled, right? Guys that set examples, guys that are going to always have their hard hat on and do the things that you need them to do. And those three, to me, are just the symbol of that for this team. And it's personified most by Dylan because he's the most vocal one and probably the biggest contributor of those three to the overall success of this season. But those other two are right up there with him. And they would not be here right now without those three players for sure.
Yeah. Man, remarkable team, man. Just enjoy the journey. I think Auburn fans have done a pretty good job. I've tried to tell them all year, man, enjoy the journey. And I know we had some people getting there and saying if they don't win a national championship, it's a bust and all that stuff. And no, man,
No,
it's been an incredible season. And look, I wrote before the Michigan State game. I said, listen, if they lose this game, if they don't make the Final Four, it does not diminish what this team did. And it doesn't to me. They could have lost that game. And I think you could still have an argument that they were the greatest, that they're the best Auburn team that there's ever been, even with the team that made the Final Four, just because of what they've done up to that point. And so I was like, losing that game wouldn't even diminish at this point what this team's done. But the fact that they validated it, and you're right, like they needed that. Like looking back, what did we say? Like before the tournament, we were like, you got to do it. You got to make the run. Bruce put the expectations out there. National championship. That's our expectation. And that's a tough one. And so that's pretty high. I mean, it's pretty high in college basketball, bad shooting night, like stuff happens. But we felt like, yeah, there's no real excuses here. You got to make a run to the Final Four. I was like, minimum, you need to be playing in the Elite Eight to go to the Final Four. That was what I said. That was my minimum.
Sure.
But the way it played out, the way it played out in that arena, if they'd have lost that game, I would have felt differently.
Sure.
Being in there, I would have been like, oh yeah, you got to win this game. Yeah. if they'd have lost that, I'd been like, no, you can't lose this game. Like
right.
Neutral site somewhere or whatever. With that was more than I thought it would be. I thought Auburn fans, pro Auburn fans, yes, for sure. But everybody with spurts of other fans, Michigan, listen, Auburn deserved it. I'm not even going to, Auburn absolutely earned that. But I do feel for Michigan and Michigan State going, really? Like, we're just straight up playing a road game. Yeah, a straight up road game in the NCAA tournament. Because that was a road for Michigan, even more so for Michigan State. That was a road game. And so, Auburn earned it. Sorry. Like, Auburn deserved that. Even more than the Houston stuff, playing Auburn and Birmingham. Houston wasn't even the number one overall seed.
No.
And this Auburn team, sorry, they deserved every bit of that. Every bit of that playing in Atlanta in that crowd. they did the work for months, man. And if you didn't read the story, like I wrote after the game at auburnlive.com, I talked to Stephen Pearl, Denver Jones, Miles Kelly, Dylan about the grind of the season. And there's some good stuff in there from them. And one of the quotes that stood out was Dylan. He was like, there was no breathing room all year. He's like, that's how he described this season. He goes, there was no breathing room. He said he talked about calling his girlfriend before the Michigan State game. And he was like, I'm excited for this game to end so I can just breathe.
Yeah.
Just have a day off, like no matter what happens. And it was just, Steven talked about the grind and it was funny. He goes, for the schedule we played, he goes, his words were, considering the schedule we played, he goes, for us to be 32-5 is ridiculous. That's what he said.
And he's right. When you look at the number of teams they played that made it into the Sweet 16, that made it into the tournament in general, that made it to the Elite Eight and now the Final Four. You played the other 3 teams in the Final Four on your schedule. Stephen Pearl is 100% right in what he's saying.
You played 9 of the 16. Well, no, you played. Well, so take yourself out. It's 15. So you could only play 15 others. You played 9 of the 16 of the 15. Yeah. And I mean, even the stat going in, Auburn played 33 games going into the NCAA tournament. 33 games they had played. 24 of those were against teams in the tournament.
Yes.
And then the other stat I looked up was they had one stretch from December 8th to December 17th. They played 3 straight games against teams that did not go to the tournament. And it's right there in that December, Christmas where, students are like, school's about to be out and there's always like, you don't play anybody. They played Richmond. Now, to be fair, here's the crazy thing. To be fair, Ohio State was top 25. Yeah. Ohio State was supposed to be in the tournament. That's one of the games I'm talking about. So they played Richmond, Ohio State, and Georgia State. And Ohio State they underachieved. That should have been a tournament team, by the way. So let's just say Ohio State actually did what they were supposed to have done. Auburn would not have had a stretch in the entire season where they played 2 non-tournament teams in a row. They only had it once because Ohio State messed around. That 3-game stretch of Richmond, Ohio State, Georgia State is the only stretch in the whole season where they went more than 1 game playing against a non-tournament team. The whole season was, if they played a non-tournament team, they played a tournament team the next time. And from February 1st until the second that we are talking, they've played nothing but NCAA tournament teams. From February 1st until now, 2 straight months, 17 straight games and counting, they have played nothing but NCAA tournament teams. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like 17 consecutive games, dude. 2 months. Tournament team. Who do we got next? Another team that's going to be in the tournament, and another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. I've never seen anything like it.
Sure. No, I mean, I'm with you. Again, it speaks to the point that this team could not be any more prepared for this moment. This whole season has prepared them for where they are right now. And I'm sure other teams can say that, but when you look at Auburn's schedule, I mean, you know it, okay? You know it. This moment will not be too big for them. Now, again, you can have a bad shooting night. Your effort and energy can be there, and you can be as locked in as you want to be.
Yeah.
And you can have a bad shooting night, and it can all go away. But there's something that tells me that this team will be prepared regardless of what takes place, and you will see a team that will fight from start to finish. And it's just going to be interesting to watch. And again, I know we got to get off here because we've been rolling for over an hour at this point. But
we had to catch up.
Yeah, we did have to catch up. But just hat tip to Bruce Pearl, hat tip to this coaching staff, to this team for what they've been able to accomplish this season. Again, they are now, in my opinion, and will forever be the best Auburn basketball team of my lifetime.
Yeah.
I mean, an ACC champion, Final Four, number 1 for multiple weeks, just best Auburn team of basketball team of my lifetime, for sure.
You're not alone in that. And I would say, barring if they don't win the national championship, if this team wins the national championship, then they'll never be topped. They can be equaled, but
Sure.
they will never be topped. But if they don't, let's say they lose to Florida, I would say it quite literally would take a team. It would take the team winning a national championship. This will be the greatest team in the history of Auburn basketball until one of them cuts down the final nets. But until then, this will be. They're just accomplished too much. And I would probably even make the argument that there will never be a team that accomplishes more in a season than this one. I mean, good luck. Good luck winning the amount of quality games, winning Maui, winning the SEC regular season. You better just win the SEC tournament while you're at it, and then the national championship. I mean, good luck topping what this team has done. It's going to be it damn near impossible. Like the schedule was that insane. It's going to be damn near impossible for an Auburn team to accomplish everything this team did. It's going to be tough. All right, we'll get out of here. Auburn, Florida, Saturday at, what did Zach say, 5:09. Duke, Houston after that at 7:50. Those are Central times. What a Final Four, should be good stuff. We'll try to come back. We'll see how the week goes. We get media. I think we got media Thursday and Friday. I'll be in San Antonio, so I'll be there. We'll see if we can't squeeze something in to get up on maybe Saturday morning, maybe on Friday at some point. Let's squeeze one in. We'll have some media stuff to talk about, and we'll just give kind of final thoughts on Auburn, Florida, maybe, and try to get something up on Saturday morning for the people.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good. By the way, I'll end on this. Basketball is so insane right now that I've never seen less interest in the football program. And I do that. I'm watching how people react, and that's not a shot at Hugh Freeze or football. It's partially like go win. At this point, stop talking, go win. But they're just basketball is, people are like, yeah, spring camp basketball. I've never in my life have I seen as little interest in a spring camp, and that is basically due to what this basketball team is doing, and just making that statement is surreal, and is just speaks just volumes of what Bruce has done with this program. Like, the words are hard to even describe it. All right, let's get out of here. For Alan Head, I'm Justin Hokanson. Go to AuburnLive.com, subscribe, go to YouTube, subscribe, turn on notifications, all that good stuff. We'll see you guys next time.